We now move to our next panel on regulation alternatives. We're looking at other jurisdictions globally, at what they're doing to encourage investment, what they're doing to protect investors, and what they're doing to foment this new technology. Moderated by Mary Siracco of the Settle Network, this panel will have Jason Chu, Peter Deitis, Renato Obisi-Blum, and Manny Rosenfeld as the panelists. Mary's a former investment professional at Union Bank of Switzerland and the World Bank. Jason Chu is the former crypto congressman of Taiwan and a leading expert on technology and regulation of technology throughout Asia. We've got Manny Rosenfeld from the Israel Bitcoin Association sharing what's going on in his country. From Brazil, we've got Renato Obisi-Blum, a leading internet lawyer and blockchain enthusiast. And finally, we've got Peter Deitis, one of the advisors to the SOV, the Marshall Islands Central Bank Digital Currency. Peter used to be a economist at the Bank of International Settlements. Without further ado, here's Mary.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Siracco. I will be the moderator of the regulations panel of other jurisdictions. Today, we will cover various jurisdictions around the world, including Asia, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. We have speakers from all around the world. And before I introduce them, let me introduce myself. My name is Mary. I am the founder and CFO of Settle Network. We are a company of cross-border payment solutions in Latin America and Europe. We do essentially a fiat on and off ramp for diverse companies, including exchanges such as Binance. So let me introduce today our panelists that will be joining this discussion. We will discuss a little bit what is going on in the world regarding regulations. And we have Jason covering Asia, in particular from Taiwan. He is a member of, he used to be a member of parliament in Taiwan. He's known as the crypto congressman. He's a vice chair of Taiwan FinTech Associations. And today he works in Taiwan, in particular with focus on development FinTech environments in Taiwan. So following that, we have Manny Rosenfeld. He is out of the Middle East in Israel. He's a mathematician from Tel Aviv. He worked as a head of research at the internet startup SimilarWeb, and for sure many of you know about SimilarWeb. That's very impressive. He established the Bitcoin community in Israel and founded Bitcoin, Israel's first Bitcoin exchange service. He's also the chairman of the Israel Bitcoin Association today. We also have Renato from Obisi-Blum, covering Latin America, an amazing region. He is based out of Brazil. He is the chairman of Obisi-Blum law firms, and it is an amazing added value to have somebody like him today covering all the regulation that's going on in Latin America. He's a professor at various universities across Brazil and has written diverse articles as well about the subject. So last but not least, we have Peter Deitis covering Europe. He is talking with us here from Switzerland. He is the chief economist of SFB Technologies, working on introducing crypto to the Marshall Islands. And this is something that we will like to cover and we would like to discuss a little bit, and that's very interesting. He previously was a Secretary General of the Bank of International Settlements and also had assignments at the OECD at the World Bank. Fun fact, I used to work also at the World Bank, but Peter, we did not get to meet, unfortunately. So let's get started. So to start today with today's topics, I want each one of you to give me a little bit of context of what's going on, particularly in your region at an Asia level, let's say more continental, and then to give me a little bit of background on what's going on in each of your countries. So if you want many, I would like if you can start and give us a little bit of insight on what's going on in the Middle East on crypto regulation.
Yeah, so to be honest, the Middle East is kind of a lot of disconnected countries, so I can't speak too much about the Middle East in general, I can speak about Israel. So Israel has had a problem with regulation in the recent times, not just with cryptocurrencies, but in general, because there were some problems with the elections in Israel. There's been a year without a permanent government and parliament because there were elections and nobody got elected, so they made another elections half a year later, and that didn't work either. So there were another round of elections half a year later. So throughout this year, there wasn't really a functioning government. So any progress in regulation that we wanted to push forward didn't really succeed. But now that finally there is a government, we are resuming these efforts to try to pass some new laws about how cryptocurrencies should be taxed and what anti-money laundering procedures should be put in place for it. Because one of the biggest problems in Israel with regards to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies right now, which I think it's similar elsewhere in the world, but I think in Israel it's much a bigger problem, that banks very often refuse to support transactions which involved cryptocurrencies in some way. Now, the bank itself, I'm not talking even about the bank itself trying to do something with cryptocurrencies. I mean, I just want to sell some Bitcoins, I want to get some Israeli shekels in return, and the bank will, in many cases, will not allow me to do that. So that's a problem, and the problem is existing because the regulation for AML in Bitcoin is not very clear. So the banks are saying that they can't manage the money laundering risks, so they prefer to refuse it. Now, we do think that their approach is illegal because the law in Israel says that the bank must provide service
unless they have
a very good reason not to do so. But that said, that's a current situation, and we hope that once the committees in the parliament, in the Knesset, will approve some new laws, we will hopefully not have this problem as much.
Okay, that's a very interesting point that Manny is touching on in terms of the situation where you have no regulation and the concern financial institutions have with money laundering, KYC, all related to compliance, right? So that brings me back to Latin America. I know that there is a general consensus of unregulation. However, how can companies proceed and work in a regulated basis? So what have you been seeing, Renato, in general in Latin America and in particular in Brazil?
Hi, Mary. Hello, everyone. When we talk about regulation in Latin America, I need to start from the beginning, telling you that, Latin America countries are still on the beginning of the creation of the regulation specific for crypto coins and also blockchain issues. Brazil is leading these issues. This point, we have several different bills of law in our Congress. We have some specific regulations as well by the Brazilian Central Bank and also the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, the Brazilian SEC. And we have also some general regulations from other sectors. Basically, what we have right now and what the countries are developing is regulations regarding the concept of the coin. For instance, like here in Brazil, right now, we don't have the same value, the crypto coin, as a money. The Brazilian Central Bank and the other regulations, they understand that we don't have, the same pattern, but we have some ways, to understand how to apply as an asset. Usually, all the regulations around Latin America understands that crypto coins are assets, not exactly money. That's the basic.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course, we have another bills of law regarding other issues, but basically, what I tell you right now is that we are in the beginning of the process creating new legislations.
Okay, that's awesome. And what you just mentioned, what you just touched upon on how governments see cryptocurrencies either as an asset or as another form of money is very interesting, and we will discuss this further on when we touch base on the stablecoin issues and how stablecoins could be a promoter of, a big promoter of an electronic cash system to enable a lot of transactions cross-border. But before we get to that, I would like to have the input on Peter on Europe in particular. What are you seeing in Switzerland? I know the ECB has been particularly hefty and, had a very big role on regulation and very vocal all the time. So what have you been seeing on your side?
Well, that's an interesting question, because you have to realize that Europe, while you have Europe and you have the ECB and you have the European Commission, in the end, regulation in many respects is really driven by countries. And therefore, I think the point that Renato made, I think is the key point, that in no country is cryptocurrencies are accepted as currencies, as money. So they are dealt with like assets, they are dealt with like securities. Some countries are grappling with it, some even haven't defined it. There's no clear regulatory framework for those crypto assets. And this is why I think there's a lot of interest in actually getting to some form of crypto money, whether it's a CBDC or something similar, that would reduce dramatically the regulatory uncertainty. And once you have money, there are laws that can be applied to foreign currencies. And so you have a lot of automaticity that currently you don't have. It's a kind of case-by-case thing. Now, everyone in Europe is working on it. And I think it's probably fair to say that Switzerland is among the most advanced in terms of the regulatory framework for banks and financial fintech companies. There's even there's the Crypto Valley in Switzerland, located around Zug. There's a quite vibrant economy there. You can even pay your taxes in Bitcoin in the canton, so that's quite amazing. And there are several banks who have started to deal with crypto and have gotten licenses at different stages. So I think, but I think we have to realize it's not money. And the Switzerland and Liechtenstein, they try sort of to put together a regulatory framework to deal with those crypto assets while awaiting the emergence of some crypto money, whether it's in form of the ECB or whether it's in Sweden, the e-krona, which is fairly advanced in concept at least. I think it's fair to say in Switzerland itself, the Swiss National Bank is not planning anytime soon to introduce its own digital form of the Swiss franc. So that's, I think, in short, the situation.
That's very interesting. And from let's say, from a government standpoint, would that be issuing their own cryptocurrency? Would that be in their best interest of their citizens, in their best interest in protection of the central bank's best interest, right? Because if we think about a sovereign currency, then it would be, of course, in detriment of any other stablecoin that's going on that has been launched already. What do you think about that?
Well, I think from the point of view of central banks, the other stablecoins, they probably, if I say it sort of flippantly, they couldn't care less, really. It's not their problem if other people have a stablecoin that is not successful because they issue their own currency. I think when you look at it from a central bank's perspective, the key thing to realize is that you may introduce a retail CBDC, so a crypto version of your existing fiat money, but that may be just too attractive for the people. So if you have a financial crisis, why would you hold your money at UBS if you have a problem? If UBS might have a problem, you just, with a flip on your iPhone or on your smartphone, you go into the crypto version and everything is fully insured with the SNB. And I think those fast switches in and out of a digital currency that is guaranteed, like the paper currency floating around, those fast switches, I think, is what makes central banks think a lot about, is it a good idea? And if it is a good idea, of how to introduce it. I think that's really the big question.
Exactly. So, and I want to talk a little bit, and before we continue with the subject, this brings me to Asia and what China has been working on and like announcing to the world their big efforts towards blockchain and publishing their own blockchain in China for the whole country. It brings me to Asia, right? What is Asia doing right now in terms of crypto? I know Korea is very regulated. Japan has issued another license for exchanges recently. What do you think, Jason? What have you been seeing in Asia? What do you think the tendency is? I know there are many countries in Asia that think in very opposite ways as well. So is there a similar tendency, or you think that that crypto adoption is moving forward?
I think definitely the China's issuance or testing of the so-called national digital currency or DCAP, digital currency electronic payment system, is really sending shockwaves around the world. Originally, U.S. came out with Libra, but has met with obstacles and challenges in the U.S. Congress, and somehow it has stalled over time, and somehow pivoted from a consortium platform to become a stablecoin play. But China has really, boost their process and really accelerate the progress since the January this year, due to the U.S. and China trade war. And it is very clear to the international observers that China is doing this DCAP is because they want to decouple U.S. dollars. And it's clear that because of the escalation of trade war and Trump's attitude towards China, this is going to be even more fierce in the next few months to come. So China already tested their DCAP in 4 cities: Hangzhou, Shenzhen, Xiong'an, and Shanghai. So altogether, with a total population of over 300 million people, it is surpassed the population of the U.S. So in no time, China will surpass U.S.'s progress in digital payment. And it is, to me, a very clear fact that China will extend this DCAP to its neighboring countries, such as in countries in Southeast Asia or in Middle Asia, to control its One Belt, One Road financing. And so on that side, China is very aggressive, and we don't see no stoppage of the China's progress. But in terms of other jurisdictions in Asia, it's rather slow. Japan is slow because of COVID-19, and South Korea is also very slow. I don't see any movement in that regard. Singapore, originally, I think it has a good position in becoming the leading jurisdiction to embrace the crypto payment. But I think because of COVID-19, it has also stalled. However, in Taiwan, we have been very aggressive in taking more solid stance on cryptocurrency. We have a new financial supervisory commissioner who is very widely receptive of the cryptocurrency. When I was a legislator and member of the parliament from 2016 to 2020, I have championed the cryptocurrency and blockchain as a national strategy. So with that, I have already passed the security token offering law. So Taiwan becomes the first jurisdiction in the world to legalize security token offering. And we are open for the global investors to invest in Taiwan. and with projects that can raise money from all over the world. And so that's, to me, it's exciting. It's not Taiwan is not a big country, but because we are small, we are able to move fast. We are agile, we are flexible, we are fast. And so I think there's a lot that we can look forward to because of the current COVID-19 status. US is on a halt. Everything is sort of stopped over there with, over 2 million people conflicted with the coronavirus, and over 200,000 people already died. And so that's a scary case to me. So I would say we will see more and more actions in Asia, particularly stemming from China and East Asia, including Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And COVID, right? It's the current situation we're in right now in a global pandemic. It's very frightening for many, but also it enables a lot of awareness around cryptocurrency, specifically in Latin America. Volumes have been rising more and more each time due to the fact that
Mary?
I think we lost her.
So I'm not sure what's going on with her.
Let's keep the conversation.
Yeah, sure, we could do that.
What's the next challenges for you, Manny?
Yeah. So maybe I'll say a few more words. Okay, yeah. Ronen is saying. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue. So you mentioned the question of whether cryptocurrencies are considered an asset or a currency. In the end, we have the same situation in Israel. It's currently considered an asset because, if you look at the law in Israel that defines what is a currency, then it doesn't look like Bitcoin fits this definition, which I don't think is correct. I mean, I think Bitcoin and the things which are similar to it should be considered a currency, but that's not the way it is according to the current law or according to the interpretation of the Israeli tax authority, which does say it's an asset. And but the problem is not so much the fact that it is an asset, but the specific laws in Israel regarding how assets are taxed are not very good. So if you try to apply the laws that work on assets and try to apply them to cryptocurrencies, then you get some absurd situations where you can't really use the cryptocurrencies because there's a lot of overhead and reporting and all kinds of weird stuff that's going on. So we, with regards to this issue, we have two main initiatives. One is like a long-term thing, which we hope maybe in several years, Bitcoin will be defined as a currency. And the other shorter-term direction is that while it's still being defined as an asset, find some new laws that will help use it, even though that it is an asset. So to make a few exceptions, so you can, for example, buy things for small amounts without having to report it as a tax event and so on.
Mary's back.
Yes, apologies for that. So I wanted to discuss a little bit the adoption of stablecoins in the world, right? I think that if we look at the stablecoin environment around the world, and if we look in terms of crypto adoption, like what originated as Bitcoin adoption at the beginning, then came all the altcoins, ICOs in 2017. What about the stablecoins that I think are rising in contrast to the adoption of altcoins? So if we look a little bit at volume graphs and at adoption graphs, we will be able to see that originally altcoins were used as a refuge for when Bitcoin went down. So if Bitcoin went up, altcoins went down because people will move from altcoins to BTC. And when Bitcoin went down, people will go back to altcoins. But now that we have stable coins and stablecoin pairs such as USDT, TUSD, Pact, etc., listed in exchanges, I would like to talk a little bit how we see that, right? If we look at the tendency of where the market is going, it looks like a lot of people are choosing to go to USDT when they're not in BTC. And that brings me to the concept of how introducing stablecoins in each jurisdiction, let's talk about not only USD paired stablecoins, but also, let's say, Brazilian stablecoin, Argentinian stablecoin, Taiwanese stablecoin, how all of these currencies will enable mass adoption and the movement towards a crypto FX environment. So I would like your opinion on that. Renato, in particular, you can start with Brazil. How do you feel about that?
Thanks, Mary. I think stablecoins is an asset that just arrived to stay, because if you compare, as much as you can to keep stable the value of not only a crypto coin, but any kind of asset or money, if you have ways to control and to give the society some specific, not only concerns, but trusts about this, it's gonna work. I want to disagree the scenario right now about the COVID-19, because what's going on right now here in Brazil, and more people, even the government, are using more crypto coins, especially Bitcoins and other coins as well, as a way to to avoid all this difficult scenario, because right now Brazil is almost whole digital. We need to to move from the analog to digital, and the last 45 days we are experiencing a very different scenario about this. So going back to stable coins, I think that it's a reversible scenario, and more we're going to be adapted and to use this concept as well.
And do you guys think, I want to know the opinion of the rest of the panelists, do you think that governments will be looking towards issuing their own stablecoin? I know that we discussed a little bit earlier with Peter, I think, who mentioned that the ECB was looking into potentially issuing their own stablecoin. Of course, with Euro, this will be quite easy and to have adoption in so many countries. So what's your take on that?
I'm not a great fan of stable coins, or not a fan, but I don't see a great future. I mean, there are two types of stable coins. There's privately issued stable coins, and there is central bank issued stable coins. Central banks issued ones are basically a digital form of their current currencies. Now that obviously has significant potential because it has all the support and the legal power and the economic power of a country behind it. And from a point of view of someone who holds it, it's a credit risk-free asset. So that's an interesting thing. If you have a stable coin issued by a private company, I'm not sure what the point of this is. I mean, there may be the question of Internet of Things, sort of small payments, that kind of stuff that I can see. But otherwise, why would you use it? I mean, you have already lots of payments technologies in most parts of the world. A stable coin that gives you an additional one, but is it really, I mean, what's the unique selling position of a stable coin that's issued by a private consortium? I don't see very many. The one I could see is if you have a huge network established that allows you to tap into that network. So if you do something that uses WhatsApp users, that uses Telegram users, that uses Facebook users, then you have a huge network, and then this becomes interesting on its own. But any other stable coin that people try to create and say, well, it's great for this, it's great for that, I'm I'm rather skeptical. I don't see much value in it. I'd rather see value, for example, in a country like Argentina or in other countries that have experienced high inflation, not of a stable coin against the Austral or something like this, but a stable coin that is stable with regard to goods or to gold or something that people care about, not stable in relation to their own currency. I mean, if you have a stable coin that is linked to the Bolivar, who would be interested in that? I think not many people.
Yeah,
That's my view.
I want to hop in and say that I agree with Peter. I think that most stable coins combine the disadvantages of traditional currencies and of the newer digital currencies. So yeah, because they don't have the official support of traditional organizations like traditional currencies do, and they do not have all the self-sufficiency and innovation and so on of decentralized coins like Bitcoin. So I'm not a big believer in that. I also don't see that a lot of people use them in Israel. I mean, sure, I mean, some do, right? But I haven't seen it like a big phenomenon. With respect to a government-issued stable coin, so there has been talks about it. They called it the Digital Shekel Project, and so there was a team in the Bank of Israel that looked into it. I don't think anything really concrete came out of it. I don't think something concrete will come out of it because, yeah, we need to remember when we talk about these things that most money today is already digital, right? I mean, most money is records in the bank accounts, so you don't really need to put a blockchain on top of that. I mean, you can take the current systems, which some of them haven't seen too much innovation, and simply improve them with the current methodology. You don't need to replace the whole thing with a blockchain. A blockchain is good for other things, for decentralization, for this kind of thing. So I don't think, so any project in this regard is either not different from what we already have, or it just doesn't work.
That's a very good point. However, think about it from a remittance standpoint, right? Imagine, I know Latin America is one of the largest remittance markets in the world after Southeast Asia, the whole Asia region. And in terms of enabling stablecoins as a means of payment cross-border, peer-to-peer, that would appear to be a solution for all the unbanked population there is. Because many you just mentioned, of course, maybe banks are a solution today, but how many people today are unbanked or don't have, the incentives on both sides, right? The banks don't have the incentives to onboard them, and the people don't have the trust to open a bank account. So, and talking a little bit, on the more futuristic side, on what's going on big networks that would be able to benefit the world launching a stablecoin. Let's talk about Libra. I know Libra has been very controversial the last couple of months. I know the SEC, the ECB, and many other institutions were not really welcoming of Libra. However, Peter mentioned that if a stablecoin would be launched in such a huge network, then this would be beneficial. What do you think in that regard?
Well, I think the point you just made on remittances, I think that is very well taken. So I don't see any really value in Europe if you have Libra. Yeah, it will be used. I mean, payments technology in particular, if everything is already electronic, like many said, people are quite conservative unless there's a real benefit. And what could there be as a real benefit is international payments, remittances, if it actually turns out to be cheap. Right now, if you go to MoneyGram or Western Union, depending on the size of the wire you are doing, you are paying easily 10%, but you can pay up to close to 20% if you wire money. So that's a huge case. Of course, for that, there needs to be, in each country where you want to do those remittances, the currency needs to be recognized. It has to have a legal framework around it. And that's the difficulty with something that aims at sort of widespread adoption across the globe. And that is also the difficulty that Libra is facing. And this is why, for example, I'm working on a project where we try to exactly tap into those sort of remittance use case by issuing a national digital currency that would be considered money everywhere in the world, a currency. We are doing that with the Marshall Islands, but it really doesn't matter. The key thing is, if you want to have such a currency used worldwide effectively, then the easiest way of doing that is using a national currency, because it falls into existing legislations. You don't need to convince the regulators and the legislator in each country where you want to be active now to say, approve my currency. And there are 200 others perhaps on the doormat, and therefore these things are not going to move very fast. I think to come back to maybe just one point, and Jason, I think that what has really a huge potential is a CBDC in China, because China has not just this question of remittances and so on. China has a much bigger interest that other countries don't have, because for international wire services, China itself is using SWIFT, and SWIFT is controlled by the US and is used for sanctions by the US. I mean, it's not officially controlled, it's independent in Belgium, but effectively, the US is using SWIFT to impose financial sanctions. And countries that don't want to come under the US radar scheme, they must be hugely interested in having an alternative for also large wire payments in their area of economic interest. And I think that is really driving the interest in China. It's also driving the interest in Russia for a digital currency. And I think once that's going, that will have, because there is economic interest and drive behind it, that could have a huge impact.
Yeah, on their economies for sure. Okay, excellent. So I think we've covered many points regarding regulation in the different regions, right? We covered Asia, Latin America, Europe, and Middle East. And I think that what we've been able to see in this discussion is the need for regulation at some point, at some level, for the protection of the users in terms of anti-money laundering, all the KYC, to have a good standard regulation. And on top of that, we've been able to discuss the adoption of stablecoins, I think, which would be the main use that would drive real adoption. We talked about remittance and the roles of financial institution in launching and issuing their own stablecoin. So I think it has been a great discussion. I think we need to wrap up. We have covered a very interesting topic here. So I want to thank you all for participating today, and happy to get any questions. If you have, please share any comments, questions, initiatives that you want to discuss. I think you'll have our contacts there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Peter, Jason, Manny.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.